I'm going to teach you how to drift your chopper in 4 easy steps. Now you might ask, why should I learn how to drift my chopper? And the answer is twofold. First, it's cool. It's what choppers do. But the more technical answer is, it's the cool way of bringing a chopper to a quick stop. For example, imagine that there's a medical emergency at the White House. Maybe somebody has a hangnail that needs immediate attention. Or perhaps you're making an emergency delivery of some high-grade powdered stimulant, and you're being called to action. You don't just come in a Marine Force One helicopter, all slow and smooth. You come in and you make an impressive entrance. You've got things to do. You've got people to impress. Now we could use the MD-500 for this. It's very easy to do it in the MD-500. It's very responsive. But not everybody has that, and I want to use something that's kind of middle of the road. Not the worst helicopter, not the best. Something about representative of the average of helicopters, and that turns out to be something of a Huey. One of the nice things about it is that it's everywhere. We have it in DCS, we have it in X-Plane, and now we have it in Microsoft Flight Sim too. If you don't have the Taug Huey, that's fine. You can use the Bell 407 or the Cabri. Those should be fine. The 206 is going to be a little bit more challenging. I don't know if that one can drift that well. I've done it, but it's kind of a not so great a drifter. If you can drift a Schweitzer, you're officially a badass and you have my respect. Now, as before, I've thrown all the visual information in one frame here, and so it's a little cluttered, but hopefully you understand what I'm trying to do. The main frame shows my cockpit view. On the upper right, we have the side view of the helicopter and its attitude. In the upper center, we have the collective position, and on the left, we have the joystick and my foot pedals. And so we're ready to proceed with step 1, learning how to brake. Helicopters are able to brake 2 different ways. The first is to essentially use reverse thrust. It's a little bit like the reverse thruster on an airliner's jet engine. It blows air forward instead of backwards, which helps decelerate the aircraft. You achieve that in a helicopter by taking that gigantic fan that's on top of it and tilting it backwards so that the air is kind of blowing forward and down instead of backwards and down. Now, how do you go about achieving that maneuver? Well, you pull the cyclic back as if you were going to ascend to a higher altitude, and you prevent yourself from doing that by lowering the collective at the same time so you maintain the same altitude. You might ask yourself, well, aren't I lowering the amount of air that I'm blowing forward? Yes, but you are blowing air forward and it is slowing the aircraft down. So I'm going to go around and try it again to demonstrate the maneuver and talk it through. I'm going to come in low over the runway so you can see how far I've really pitched the aircraft. I'm coming in hot, about 100 knots. Now to begin my deceleration, I pull the cyclic back to achieve the nose-up attitude and lower the collective to maintain altitude over the runway. You can see that my airspeed is starting to drop, and around 40 knots I'm going to lose lift, as we've talked about in a previous video. So I have to pull the collective back up to increase lift as my airspeed drops. Eventually, I get to a hover. However, because of the increased torque from pulling up the collective, the helicopter wants to twist and yaw, and you have to compensate for that with the pedals. It might seem a little overwhelming to have to watch your airspeed while at the same time maintaining yourself over the runway, but that's just an intellectual exercise. Just know that it's going to happen. Keep your eyes out the window, and when the aircraft starts to drop, just raise the collective and adjust your pedals to compensate. So we'll go around for step 2, trying the turn. We're going to advance to the next stage of attempting the drift. We're just going to go down the runway, slow down, and turn into it, see what happens. Now we're going to initiate the same way, coming in hot and slowing down with the same nose-up maneuver, but instead of stopping to a hover, we're going to initiate a left-hand turn. You can go left or right. It's going to go left. And let's see what happens. Now, this is a coordinated turn, meaning I'm banking to the left and I'm also torquing pedal to the left. And so I'm turning in a proper fashion. I am turning in the direction that I am turning in. And I have slowed down before I got into the turn, and now I'm just turning and orbiting around a spot on the ground. I'm not slowing down any further. And so I can do this indefinitely, and something more has to happen to coast to a drifted stop. So one thing we can do is apply hard left pedal so that the turn is no longer coordinated. I am turning harder than the direction the aircraft is drifting in. This is a drift in a sense. So the aircraft is now angled harder left than the direction of the aircraft, which means that the broad side of the aircraft is now facing into the wind. And this turns out to be the second way that a helicopter can slow down, which is rather than the streamlined profile of the front of the helicopter, you open it out to the entire elongated tail of the helicopter into the wind, and that presents a higher air resistance, which slows you down over time. So you are angled in a different direction than the aircraft is traveling, and you're slowing down. So you've essentially created the drift by pedaling harder than the aircraft is actually turning. And now we're ready for step 3, combining the two types of helicopter braking into one braking turn. So we'll go around and try it again. We're going to be coming in hot, and we're going to be pulling back on the cyclic to slow down while at the same time dropping the collective. And as we're coming down the runway, we start turning left, and we're adding left pedal, and we're banking a little left so that we're sliding to the left off the runway. And it's starting to yaw harder than the direction of the turn. So you're hitting the right side of the aircraft with the wind. And as you slide left, you have to bring the collective up to maintain the hover until you come to a standstill. So if you get to this point, congratulations, you've achieved a drift. What you haven't done is landed it, which is our next step. Step 4, aiming for the landing zone and landing it. Now, I don't want to come off as some kind of unmitigated badass. I'm not a pilot, as you should know by now, and I'm not perfect. And this is a skill that has to be developed, cultivated, and perfected. It takes practice. As you can see from several attempts here, I did not land this exactly right on my first try. So it takes practice, and you got to do it over and over again until you get comfortable. And I suspect it's a matter of not just practice on the particular aircraft, but on the particular location that you're landing at, so that your visual cues line up the same way every time. So if you're landing at the White House helipad and you want to drift onto that, that's something that you should be doing all the time. You should be the designated White House helipad drifter guy. So we're going to go around and do this again, and this time we're going to select that landing zone that I've failed multiple times at, and that will be our target. The idea here is to keep that landing zone in one spot on the windshield as you swing the aircraft around. Keep it in the one spot, and you're swinging it around both from a yaw perspective and a directional perspective. You're basically kind of bringing the aircraft around, and it's going to sideswipe into the landing zone. But it helps to keep the landing zone in that one spot so you know that you're headed towards it. And we're going to approach the same way that we've done so far. We're coming in, we're going to come in low. You're going to use the pedals to start the sideways approach. You're going to use the cyclic to brake. You're going to use the collective to control your height. And as you get closer to the landing zone, you're going to use the cyclic bank to control the lateral approach speed to the landing zone. That means as you start to drift, you can kind of tilt the helicopter left or right. You can tilt it in a bank to throw some side wind at the landing zone to help slow you down or to minimize the slowdown. Maybe you want to approach, maybe you slow down too early. So while you may be banking a little bit to the left to throw that side wind, don't forget that you're also pulling back to slow down. So you've got actually these two ways to slow down, plus the pedals, which are doing the sideways yaw slowdown. So you've actually got two main ways to slow down, and then your final bank slow down. That's three methods to skid into the landing zone. I have to say that the end stage is chaotic because there's a lot of things going on. You're slowing down to the landing zone so that you have to be on target. You are controlling the height and speed of the descent to the touchdown. Now, understand that you're also coming down now at that critical speed where the helicopter loses lift. So you have to use this collective a lot to slow down and also to keep from crashing onto the landing pad. And you have to control the yaw because you're adding so much torque so quickly that it's going to want to spin around on you. So you have to really hard pedal into it. So my final tip on this is that the visibility out of the helicopter varies depending on the model. Some models are very easy to see on either side of the helicopter. The Black Hawk, for instance, is extremely difficult, as you probably know, to look out and do a landing with. So I prefer to drift into the side that I am sitting on. And so while you can, in this Huey, do a drift to the left, it's actually easier to do it to the right because you have this window spot here that gives you easier visibility to keep the landing zone in a nice spot on the windshield. So as I mentioned, this takes a lot of practice because a lot of things are happening at the end and it's very chaotic. But what I've given you is the mechanism on how to do it. And what I can't do is give you the time practicing on it that helps you get good at it. So I hope that helps. I hope you get good enough at it to get put on the White House shortlist for emergency deliveries. And if you have any questions or comments, I look forward to seeing them. And until next time, may the feeling of that rotor wash over you.
Huh? Yeah, boy.
Yeah, boy.